Hello and welcome to another episode of Fan Rebooking with Ryan Acidheads Murphy, where I kind of go back over various events, characters, gimmicks, angles, whatever, different aspects of pro wrestling history, and kind of, as a fan, put my own spin on them, rebook them. This series is inspired by the excellent video series by KFAB Commentary's Guest Booker, where they have actual bookers from the pro wrestling industry come in and basically do the exact same thing. Hypothetically, how would they have handled a situation if it had been put in their control? And I decided to do this series because I didn't agree with everything they were saying. Because in a lot of cases, a lot of them I think are just stuck in the past. They don't want to realize that things have changed and are never going to be the way they were before. That there are different ways that you can do stuff. Some of them I think are just inside the pro wrestling bubble and can't see sometimes that things have changed outside the bubble. And it's not always going to keep working. What they've been doing and what they've done in the past isn't going to work just the way it used to. I'm not saying that any of them are necessarily entirely wrong, just that I didn't agree with how they did things or some of their points of view. Now this one is going to be based off of the Invasion. Now, they did two different guest booker videos for the Invasion with two very different individuals. Jim Cornette on one side and Vince Russo on the other. So you basically had a wrestling booker and a writer. Two different viewpoints, so you got pretty much two different extremes. Both, I think, had valid points. But see, that's what I think an individual such as myself brings to the table in this whole thing, and why I would like to start my own wrestling promotion. I'm not going to go into that right now, because I can see the good points from both sides where they, they think that their part of it is the most important part, and that's not necessarily the case. If you have the whole thing working together properly, it works better. So this is how I would do the Invasion. Now, Cornette wanted to try and turn it into some sort of shoot where you're trying to convince the fans watching that this whole thing was real. I'm talking about the WCW buyout and then WCW and ECW invasion of WWE in 2001. Now, I don't think people would buy it because it's a business. You cannot convince people that that there's really that much animosity going on between these people. In many cases, some of them were well known to be friends for ages. It's just not going to work. Okay? You need to go back to basics and just tell people a fucking story. And it needs to be a story that's going to make sense. And having these guys willing to kill each other over what amounts to who's going to work where and how they're going to be working, it doesn't ring true enough to me. It just doesn't sound plausible. Plus, you're basically going right into the hardest part of the feud, or the most heated part of the feud. You're completely skipping over any kind of build-up. You could make the argument that, well, the build-up was the years that WCW and WWF warred against each other on TV, or for TV ratings, but that's not direct confrontation between wrestlers. The wrestlers, what is their personal motivation? Well, yes, Cornette brought up the very valid point that their motivation is going to be their livelihood. They don't want to lose it. But are they willing to just go and beat the fuck out of each other in front of people over it? It doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to borrow one thing he did say that did make sense, that I could see happening, to kind of start off my particular version of this, but I'm also going to kind of borrow a little bit from Vince Russo along the way. just little touches, because I didn't really agree with his soap opera version of events either. In my version of things, basically how it starts off is WWE is having a party. There may not even be any matches on the night, they're just having a big old fucking party because WCW's out of business. And if somebody turns on WCW's show that night, all they're going to get is like a montage of WWE programming, or basically something with Vince McMahon's music playing, no chance, just to make it very clear who fucking won, and if they want to find out what's going on, they need to turn to Raw. That's the point. Now, the reason for that, I actually did kind of like, because in that Vince Russo's thing, he actually wanted to do something along the lines of a montage. He wanted to celebrate WCW and give the fans, a trip down memory lane and the highlights and all the good stuff that happened. I kind of like that idea, but at the same time, it's not really conducive to going from WCW into this invasion angle. And he wanted to just basically do the NWO in reverse, and I don't like that. I didn't like the NWO at the time. I don't like it now, and I would never fucking want to use it. Not the way he did. I do have it in my little plan here, just not in the same capacity. Because it got way the fuck out of hand in WCW. So, first night, WWE, Raw, there's a party. Just a big old party going on. And on Nitro, it's just Vince McMahon's music and whatever video package they've prepared, basically saying, turn to Raw now. So we're basically going to have this party going on, and then Vince is going to go out and do his promo. He's going to, that I did like about what Cornette was saying. Just let him talk. Just let him shoot on how he feels about WCW, or has felt about them all these years, and how glad he is they're gone. Finally. He won. We don't necessarily need Vince McMahon to be a character, or his character in this case. We just want Vince McMahon out there shooting on WCW and Ted Turner and the whole shebang. But then we want him to start making it a bit more personal to the wrestlers. Okay, at first it's just him shooting on WCW, but then he's going to start bringing the wrestlers into it, and he has their contracts now, and he's going to make damn sure they never work another day in their lives. He's going to go ahead and be nice and bring some of them in to work for him, just so he can fucking bury them, and, I don't know how he would phrase it, how he would work this promo, or this shoot promo, but just go from what the audience would like to hear, which is him gloating, basically, and, actually being emotional for real, and expressing how he felt about WCW, but then he needs to kind of go more towards the Vince McMahon asshole boss character and start making it personal towards the wrestlers. However he would do it that would work best with him doing it. At which point we need pretty much the guys that we're going to be having as the generals, the managers, the bigwigs of WCW come out and confront him. In this case, I'm going with Flair and Dusty Rhodes. They're the best talkers that WCW had. They're probably two of the best talkers that pro wrestling has ever seen, at least within my lifetime. And earlier, of course, I was born in 82, so they've been around longer than that, obviously, but you know what I mean. And basically, this is what I'm going to borrow from Cornette, which is, they are not going to let him do this. If he tries to misuse them as his talent and his roster, they are going to fight by, they're not going to violate their contracts, they're just not going to cooperate with anything he does. They're not going to get violent with anybody, because it's not the other wrestler's faults that Vince McMahon is doing this to them, but they're not going to cooperate. They're not going to, They're just gonna get in the ring, lay down, and let themselves be beat. They're, gonna just stand outside the ring and get counted out. They're just, they're gonna do whatever they have to just completely be uncooperative and never put themselves in any kind of harm's way. And then maybe, that there's an exchange and things do get heated, and at some point, maybe there becomes some hints that if any of Vince McMahon's guys do try to get frisky, we'll say, not frisky, that's has a sexual meaning to it, get a little bit too hands-on with the WCW guys, they will retaliate, and they will not be nice about it. So you have this situation that is quickly coming to a head. It's going to blow up in Vince McMahon's face. He's gone ahead and bought all these contracts. He can't just leave these guys sitting at home earning money. His ego's too big to do that with them. He wanted to bring them onto TV and just bury them and let his guys walk all over him. And they're not going to fucking let him do it. So now what the fuck is he going to do? So this is where we let the WCW, talkers, Flair and Rhodes, kind of do their honest shoot moment where they say, we've been doing this for so long. All the guys that you brought in from WCW love the pro wrestling business. They love entertaining the audience. Why would you do this to us? Why would you do this to the audience? Okay, and this is where we're going to start turning things against McMahon a little bit so that WWE can be the heel in this situation. They were willing to do it for the invasion angle to begin with, so we're going to let them be the big bullies in this case too, and this is where we're going to start turning the tide of the audience. Start directing you, the fans, the audience, into being against McMahon. And do it in an honest fashion that makes sense. We're here. We went ahead and went along with this buyout without any problems. We didn't think that you would do this to us. It was never personal for us. We were just working for WCW and Ted Turner. So why the hell are you going to do this to us? We haven't done anything to you on a personal level. It was business. And you won the business side of things, and we came to work for you as professionals, so why in the hell are you going to be so unprofessional and personal and make it personal? We're not going to let you do that. In fact, because we can't trust you now, we don't want to work with your guys at all. The only way we're going to work for you is if you give us our own goddamn show. Okay? And then we're going to have Paul Heyman come out. And, of course, he's always been good at the, kind of pushing people's buttons. At this point, Vince, the crowd's turning against him, hopefully. And we need to give Vince another push over the edge. So we have Paul Heyman come out, and he's going to play up to Vince McMahon's greedy side. His businessman wanting to make money side. And he's going to tell him, you know what, McMahon, somebody has needed to tell you this for a long time, and all the fans out there in the world of pro wrestling, not everybody wants to watch your version of pro wrestling. Different people have different tastes, different people want to see different things. Why can't you give all of us our different shows? ECW had a loyal following, WCW had a loyal following. Why do you want to piss them off and lose the opportunity to make all the money that you could by having all of us working on our own separate shows and you just being the business backing the whole thing? That way you own your own competition. You're going to make all the money for WWE, but you're still giving the fans and the wrestlers and the different rosters who work for these different companies what everybody wants. Everybody wins. You get to say that you won the Monday Night Wars, you put everybody else out of business, you won. But now here is your chance to finally be the winner, but still give all the different fans of these different shows what they want, and then make your money. Make all the money for yourself and your company. However, you'd have to work out a proper way to phrase it to where it sounds good to the audience, to where it sounds like Heyman is kind of pulling one of his, not fast ones, but he's one of those guys that has a reputation for being able to got people around his point of view. You kind of give the feeling that he's doing that to McMahon. So then, Raw ends, and you have a whole week of people talking about this whole event on Raw of, oh my god, what the fuck is going to happen? What is McMahon going to do? And next week, Vince comes out, maybe towards the end of the show. We want people to stew on this. We want people talking about it all the way through Raw. Wrestlers, people in the back, the commentary team, guys on commentary, maybe have some WCW guys just kind of there somewhere, mysteriously, maybe a couple in the audience even, not interfering in matches, just there. They want to know what's going to happen, everybody wants to know what's going to happen, and we're not going to tell them until the end of the show. So Vince is going to come out, and he's going to Paul Heyman and Dusty and Flair are going to be with him, and it's going to come down to they've negotiated this whole thing, and he's come around to their point of view. He sees what they're talking about, and he's going to give them a chance. He's going to go ahead and turn SmackDown over to the WCW guys and let them turn that into Thursday Night Nitro. And he's going to turn Heat, which was on MTV, the perfect audience for ECW. It's going to go to ECW. And it's going to be extended to a 2-hour show and be put in a somewhat later time slot to fit their more risque nature. Paul Heyman will be in charge of the ECW product, with Vince McMahon's people backing him up for the business side of things, which was always his downfall. And the same with WCW. Flair and Dusty and their team are going to be in charge of the WCW show, with Vince McMahon's business people backing them up. They will be allowed to do their shows how they see fit, and as long as they maintain a profit margin that is acceptable to both keeping them on the air and whatnot, they will be allowed to conduct their business as they see fit, with Vince McMahon and WWE backing them up financially. So we're going to go ahead and let Vince McMahon kind of be the good guy for this. He's going to appear to the fans like he's seeing things our way for a change. We don't always want to watch just WWE. It would be nice to have some variety. But of course, it's not going to be quite that nicey nice. There's going to be tension involved. Vince McMahon has basically been forced into doing this in some ways, even though he does kind of see it their way, and he is intrigued by the notion that he can make more money this way. He still is feeling a bit Vince McMahon-ish, shall we say. The asshole boss character is still there. So, basically, yeah, and we're going to leave that hint of that part of his personality in there by him basically finishing up by saying, and if they screw up, they're finished. And that gives us a point when WCW is going to have their own show, the ECW is going to have their own show, and where do we go from there? Well, the first question that I asked when I was thinking about how I would do this is, what does each brand need? WWE is already in a strong position. It could use some shaking up, though. The roster is a bit bloated, it's a bit stale, it could use some movement. Of course, at this point, we've already had an influx of some guys from WCW that are already starting to kind of do well in WWE's programming, but at the same time, it's the roster's a bit too large. It could use some pruning, and they really haven't done a lot with a lot of the guys that were there, and there's a lot of room for new faces in WWE at this point. They need to build up new talent. They need to bring in new talent and get rid of some of the old guys that they just don't have anything to do. You know, they don't have anything for them. They don't know how to use a lot of them, especially the small cruiserweight types. So that's what WWE needs. It needs a bit of a shaking up. WWE, WWF. It was WWE by that point, I think. I'm pretty sure it was. WCW needs rehabilitated. By this point, it has lost most of its audience. It is in the gutter. It's not doing well at all. It needs to be rehabbed. ECW was still going strong. I mean, they were doing really well when they went bankrupt. They just ran out of money, and the company, one of the companies that was backing them up, I believe, also kind of went kaput, and that's what led to the downfall. It was all on the financial side, not the fan side, the fan base side. They were still going strong and had a real strong fan base. So what ECW really needs, other than what they've already gotten, which is somebody managing the money that knows what the fuck they're doing, what they need is exposure, which they're going to get with MTV, because like I said, that's the perfect audience for ECW. They were never going to get real big on TNN. When it turned into Spike, if they had still been there, it would have been the absolute perfect audience for them, of course, but since that hadn't even happened yet at this point, I don't think. I'm not sure when they changed to Spike. And of course, WWE had taken the pro wrestling show on that channel. MTV is the perfect channel for ECW to be on. And I'm pretty sure that is where Heat was at the time. I'm positive of it. So, Heat becomes ECW's Hardcore TV. WCW gets SmackDown, and that becomes Thursday Night Nitro. And from here, we're going to go to WCW's first show. I'm not going to do much of anything with WWE programming through this. I'm going to start building some things up for the other two shows, mostly. Because at that point, WWE already had feuds that were going strong. They didn't need anything to be shaken up in that regard. They just needed new faces and some movement in the roster. So we're going to start with WCW's Nitro on Thursday, the new show. And Vince McMahon, being Vince McMahon, is not going to leave well enough alone. He sent a few guys over to have a big match, because he wants to prove who the best talent, who has the best talent. He wants to kind of nudge things in the direction of WCW and ECW getting put out of business. This is all just a setup for changing talent around, of course, but we need a reason for it to happen, and Vince McMahon being an asshole is always an easy and plausible tactic to use. So we're going to take the smaller guys that were in WWE at the time, S.A. Rios, Taka Michinoku, K-Quick, and we're going to send them to WCW, and they're going to have a six-man tag with Rey, Mysterio, Helms, and Moore. That's Gregory Helms and Shannon Moore, I believe, pre-Hurricane. I'm not sure if Shannon Moore ever did anything else in WWE. And we're going to let them have a badass match. We want this to be a real blow-the-house-down kind of match, because we want WCW to get some more attention, and this is the kind of match we need them to be doing regularly to get more attention. You know, excitement. You know, the Cruiserweights was always a big draw for WCW. I don't care what Nash and any of the other motherfuckers say. I know that when I watched it, that's what I liked to watch, and I know a lot of other people felt the same way. Let's just say I remember, maybe I'm biased, but I do remember a lot of cheering for the Cruiserweights when there wasn't a whole lot of cheering, or even, people weren't really interested at all in NWO. They like to try and change history, but I do remember that the reaction wasn't as strong as they would like people to believe after a while. So they're going to have an awesome match, all those 6 guys, and of course the WWE guys are going to see that, holy shit, these people love us here. We don't get this kind of reaction when we're in WWE, we're staying here. So basically they're going to jump ship, and there'll have to be something worked out on how they can do that. But they're all working for WWE now, technically, so basically all they have to do is put in some sort of transfer from one division to another. And in this case, Vince is going to be pissed off, but we're going to come up with some reason why he can't stop them. Or we might even try and work something in where he tries to stop them and, something happens to where he gets overruled. Doesn't really matter. We don't need to focus a whole lot on why they're leaving. This is just changing the rosters up without doing something stupid like a draft. So we're also going to set up a tag team tournament, and we're also going to start setting up some new feuds, because we're basically starting clean slate here. We had some good rosters there at the time. I'm going to set up a feud with Terry Funk and Jeff Jarrett, which is going to be based around who has the strongest wrestling lineage. And Dustin Rhodes, that's Dustin, not Dusty, but both of them actually could come and go in this, but Dustin is going to be solidly into this feud a little bit later on. We're going to do Sting vs. Kanyon, because I believe Kanyon had a lot more to give than he was ever allowed to. Booker T vs. DDP is a established and solid feud to work with, and Conan vs. Kurt Hennig is what I'm going to set up for that particular night. And I will go into what the feuds are about, at least what I have for them being about later. Okay, sorry for that abrupt dropout. I accidentally hit a button on the keyboard and it stopped the recording, so I'm having to pick this up again. So, from WCW's first show, we're going to go into ECW's first show on that Saturday or Sunday night, when I believe it was on... We would want it on a different night of the week. Sunday would probably be okay, but then I don't know, that would always leave ECW as an opener for the pay-per-view, no matter what or what product it was. That doesn't quite work. Was Heat on Sunday or Saturday? Or was it on Sunday Night Heat? It was on Sundays, and that's what they used for their opening show. So maybe we'll leave Heat alone and give ECW its own show on MTV. Friday and Saturday nights aren't good for TV shows because people are out doing stuff. But we've already got Monday and Thursday, and we don't really want to put ECW... I guess we'll go ahead and do ECW as kind of a late show, or maybe an early evening show on a Saturday. Early evening Saturday when people are not quite going out yet. That would probably work. And Heat is there to be the opening show for whatever pay-per-view, and it can have just whoever. We can actually do some interesting things with that, perhaps. This just occurred to me, because I just realized what night Heat was on, and that they always use that as a pre-show or part of the pre-show for the pay-per-views. So I can't really give that to ECW because they used it for something else other than just being a third show. So ECW is going to get a new show, 2 hours, MTV, Saturday evening, early Saturday evening, or Friday evening. Either one works. Maybe Friday after school would be a good time slot. No. Yeah, that's not too bad. Friday after school. Yeah, around 4. Well, no, we don't want... It's more of an adult show. Well, with the cussing and sexuality and stuff, so we don't necessarily want to aim it at teenagers. That people would get pissed off about that. So early evening on a Saturday or Friday, say around 6:30, 7-ish, for ECW. It's not a very good time slot, however you want to slice it. But the problem is that Mondays and Thursdays are usually the weakest nights of the week for TV shows, which is one of the reasons why they've always been traditional for wrestling shows. I don't know, could you do Thursday Nitro and then have that lead into ECW's show? And just use it and do it kind of like in the late night TV format? That might work. Just have it on after Nitro. I don't know, that's a business thing that would have to be sorted out by people that know better than I do about when would be the best time to put on a new show. But it is an interesting conundrum, but we'll leave it there for now. I don't want to spend forever just trying to ponder over what the best night of the week for ECW's show would be, since Heat really wouldn't work. But ECW's first show, we're going to open up with Rob Van Dam vs. Jerry Lynn. Okay, we want to showcase ECW at its finest. Those two guys are the guys to do it. Okay, and then we're going to have a surprise, and that's going to be Raven is going to show up and start some shit with Tommy Dreamer, and they're going to end up in a match. We're going to do Nova vs. Easy Money, because even though he was on WCW when it was bought, he's going back to ECW right off the bat, I should say. Then we're going to do Tajiri vs. Super Crazy vs. Kid Cash. We're going to return to the Carino, Just Incredible, and Sandman feud for the world title. Basically stripping both titles off of Rhino. Well, we're not going to strip the titles off of him, but basically Rhino doesn't want to work for ECW because he feels like it's a second-rate show. We're going to have him immediately become kind of a heel figure for ECW, or possibly a heroic figure for WWE. I'm not sure how we would play that out, but basically I want to send Rhino to WWE. I think he's shown out better there, and even though I really enjoy his crazy-ass looking pile drivers, they're dangerous, and I'm not sure we would really want him doing that sort of shit for any length of time continuously, so I think Rhino would work real well in WWE, and that gives them a new face that fits in with their kind of format, which is the big muscle bodybuilder looking dudes. And it says that I've never been a fan of the whole monster wrestler gimmick to begin with, so send him with his monster wrestler gimmick to WWE, where they like that sort of thing and it works better. Okay. So basically we're setting up some good matches because ECW was always more about what they did in the ring. It was the smart show. In a lot of ways, the educated wrestling fan, as Joey Styles liked to put it, that had an appreciation for what was going on in the ring a lot more than other wrestling fans tended to. So we're going to focus on giving the ECW fans the kind of stuff that they've always loved, and trying as hard as we can to attract more people that are going to enjoy the same sort of thing. We're going to get rid of Rhino while sending him somewhere where I think he would shine out a lot better. Then we're going to go to WWE the next week, and Vince is going to be pissed off that he's losing people, but he's going to welcome Rhino. We've set up a tag team tournament for WCW. We're also going to set up a tourney for the TV title for ECW, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to get rid of some more people from WWE that they weren't doing anything with, really. So we're going to send some tag teams over for the tag team tournament, and he's going to send Saturn, Al Snow, Steven Richards to ECW for the tag team title, or the TV title tournament. Okay, now the next week on WCW, or well, the next WCW show, from there, Flair and Dusty are going to have some more negotiation stuff going on with Paul Heyman. Now, I'm not going to try and talk like these guys do, but the thrust of it is basically going to be that they've lost a whole lot of talent, especially in the cruiserweight division, and that's always been a strong part of WCW is the cruiserweight division. So they want to bring in some new talent, and they know Paul Heyman's the guy to go to for talent from Japan. They've already got Conan bringing in some new guys from Mexico. They want Paul Heyman to bring up some talent from Japan, and in order to make this mutually beneficial, they're going to make the cruiserweight title cross promotional from ECW and WCW, which is going to give ECW guys more exposure. It's going to make the cruiserweight division even more important and give it more prestige. You basically just keep continuing the feuds we've set up, have some good matches. Basic pro wrestling. And in fact, very next ECW show, whoever holds the cruiserweight title at the time is going to defend it against Super Crazy and Little Guido in a three-way dance elimination style. ECW original. Okay, Doring and Roadkill are going to issue an open challenge. Danny Doring and Roadkill were the tag title champions in the ECW, the last ones. And actually, they still hold that distinction because they never lost those titles, and nobody else ever had them in WWE, as far as I know. They never resurrected them. Okay, and the Baldies are going to go to WCW for the tag team tourney as well. And the reason for this is I want to have the Baldies stay in WCW because I think they're bigger guys. Their style is going to fit in better with WCW's tag team division. And Vince is going to get the Dudleys and the Hardys, the Hardy Boys, because I think they were still just barely, but they were still together in 2001. I could be wrong about that, but if not, he's going to talk them into working together again. Edge and Christian were already solidly split up at that point, I believe. If not, I might go ahead and send them to ECW as well, but I don't think so. But I'm sending the Dudleys and Hardys to ECW, and they're going to answer that open challenge of the Doring and Roadkill, and then going to set up a three-way TLC match for the titles there, for their first pay-per-view. And basically what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of all the tag team guys out of WWE because WWE has not used the tag teams. It has not had a real tag team division for a long time. I mean, they have stables that pop up and go away that fight over the tag team titles, but they have not had any long-term dedicated tag teams for a very long time. Whereas in ECW and WCW both, the tag team divisions were still treated with some respect, and they actually had dedicated tag teams. And Vince doesn't want to be outdone, so on that episode of Raw, he's going to also negotiate with Heyman, and they're going to make the Hardcore title cross-promotional. Once again, this is going to give more exposure to the ECW guys, and is also going to put the Hardcore title into, firmer footing. It's going to give it a little bit more exposure, it's going to give it a little bit more prestige and weight as well. A little bit less of a joke and more of just hardcore. And kind of, if anybody would be paying attention to this, it's kind of a little bit of a nod towards how WCW and WWE both, using quotation marks here, borrowed so heavily from ECW and what they had been doing. And then we're going to go into our first WCW pay-per-view, because after this point, basically all the stuff that we've been wanting to set up for these first few weeks has already been going on. We can just continue the feuds that we've set up, do more stuff about different guys going to the different companies to be in the tournaments, and the, answering that tag team challenge and whatnot. So, from WWE, we've sent over Scotty and Grandmaster 6A, and I think he had been fired, but we can bring him back. We're sending over Farouk and Bradshaw, the New Age Outlaws, and I think that was all the tag teams that were going on in WWE at the time. And the Baldies from ECW. So, first matches, we're having the Baldies beat Scotty and Grandmaster 6A. We're having Palumbo and O'Hare, who were the tag team champions, beat Farouk and Bradshaw, because we want to add some prestige and bring back some of that prestige and weight and importance to the tag team titles in WCW again. And in order to do that, I want to build up Palumbo and O'Hare as strong champions. So I'm going to have them beat everybody in this tournament and retain the titles and actually have them be strong champions. And we're going to start that by them beating... I hate screwjob finishes. Under my guidance, there's no screwjob finishes. Everything is a clean win, and we focus on competition. We bring that competition aspect back to pro wrestling, where it needs to be in there, to me. So, you're never going to make guys look bad if they lose in a way, it's all in how it's presented. If you have a really strong basketball team or football team or whatever lose to somebody that on paper they should be able to beat, nobody thinks, oh, that's just because all of a sudden they suck, they'll never win again. They can't possibly win again if they lost to them. No, they were just having a bad day, or that team wasn't quite as bad as people thought they were. There's give and take. As long as you have kept that element of competition to pro wrestling while people are watching it, and you allow them to suspend disbelief while they're watching, and you have that element of competition in there, it doesn't matter who wins and loses. It's all about the story that's being told in the ring and outside of it. Some people prefer what goes on in the ring, some people prefer what goes on outside of it, some people like both equally. I'm an in-ring guy. My favorite stuff is what they do in the ring, but I have an appreciation for all that goes into pro wrestling. I see that it's a puzzle, and if you take out pieces of it, like that element of competition, and letting guys sell properly, and having them be able to work a match instead of scripting everything, if you take out those pieces, it hurts the product as an overall whole picture. So I want to bring all that shit and put it back into pro wrestling. And I would do that if I could start my own promotion, but that's not what this video is about. But I'm bringing that back, and that'll be an element of all of these fan rebooking things that I'm doing. That's my philosophy about pro wrestling, is that there are elements from all of it that work, and and when worked or used together properly, they make a very good product. So we're having Palumbo and O'Hare convincingly beat Farouk and Bradshaw, but we're not going to make anybody look weak. That's the key right there, is that you have them win, but you don't have to make them look weak. We're going to have New Age Outlaws beat Disco and Chavo. We might have Chavo doing kind of a dancing salsa gimmick, or salsa dancing gimmick or something, if he's willing to do that. That's another thing I don't like, is how the cookie cutter personas, the cookie cutter personalities, the cookie cutter beige, bland pro wrestlers of today, which was already starting to happen in 2001. It was starting to become noticeable with the loss of so many top talent guys like Austin and Rock, and they weren't gone, but Undertaker, they were all kind of in and out. And then Mick Foley did retire, so you didn't end up with a whole lot of dynamic personalities in the WWE at that point. So that's something else I would be bringing back, is letting these guys be themselves. Stop scripting everything. Let them talk and learn how to talk. for themselves. So if Chavo didn't want to do a salsa gimmick that wasn't him, I wouldn't force him to. So we're going to have New Age Outlaws beat them because they're a well-established tag team. Then we're going to have Rick Steiner and Animal from the Road Warriors tagging together. Probably would be a real stiff tag team, but I think they'd work together pretty well. And again, very well-established tag team guys. They're going to go over Helms and more. But we're not going to squash them because I hate squash matches. So that's our first matches. Then we're going to have DeBaldi's are going to lose to Steiner and Animal. New Age Outlaws are going to lose to Palumbo and O'Hare because, again, we're letting the Palumbo and O'Hare beat the established tag teams and the tag team specialist guys in this. With Palumbo and O'Hare beating Steiner and Animal at the end, because we want to add that level of... We want them to be convincing tag team champions, and by having all this stuff, I believe it'll make them look really good. It'll make the tag team title look even better. And, nobody gets fucked over because this is our tag team division. Pretty much the whole thing right here in this one tournament. So if we make anybody look bad at this point, then they're going to continue to look bad down the line. We don't want that. Making anybody look bad, just, putting your winner over at the expense of making your loser look bad is bad business in my mind. You don't have to have anybody look bad. If you do a squash match, you make the other guy look bad. Having it be a close, a competition, a back and forth, where you feel like anybody could have won, anybody could have lost, and then they win, nobody looks bad. They lost, so what? Maybe they'll win next time. They could have won this time, they just didn't. That's what you go for. That's the mentality, that's the story that you're telling. Is anybody could have won, who was it going to be? This time it was Palumbo and O'Hare, maybe next time it'll be the other guys. That way you keep the audience guessing. At least better than they do now, where most of the time who's going to win going into the match a month before it even happens, when it's on a pay-per-view. So, then we have some feud matches. That tag team tournament's going to eat up most of the pay-per-view. Really the important thing from this pay-per-view is that all the tag teams that we got sent to WCW are going to decide to stay. On WWE, Vince is going to be pissed off, but you know what? He's going to have to bring in some new talent to fill up the roster that he's losing, so we get what we want from WWE, which is a bit of a mix-up. But the important thing for the tag tournament is really just making sure that pay-per-view is making sure that tag tournament looks really, really good. We make all of our tag teams look really good, especially Palumbo and O'Hare, our champions. Then, depending on how much time we would have left, we might have a few, or a couple, 3 feud matches in there, because that's 7 matches just for the tag team tournament. And if you want to give them time to really put on a good show, that's most of your pay-per-view right there. So maybe just 1 or 2 feud matches in there, like the DDP versus Booker T. And just focus on the tournament. Every pay-per-view does not have to be something that, continues every single storyline on that show. You don't have to have a blowout on every pay-per-view. Every pay-per-view should have a purpose, yes, a very good purpose, and in this case, it's the tournament. We want the tag team titles to be built up and our tag team champions to look really good, so that's the purpose of this pay-per-view. Okay, our first ECW pay-per-view is making as much of the talent look as good as possible, and as well as setting up some more feuds. Okay, we're going to have Lance Storm be a surprise entry into the TV tournament, and he's going to go up against Saturn and win. That, I think, would be a damn good match, as long as Saturn's on form. We're going to have Rob Van Dam versus C.W. Anderson. C.W. Anderson could be a huge star if given a chance, I think. I just love his gimmick, and he's good at it. He looks good doing it. But Rob Van Dam's going to win. Then we're going to have Jerry Lynn versus Nova. I think that would be a damn good match. We're going to have another surprise entry of Chris Candido. Hopefully we can save his life in this hypothetical situation. And we're going to have Candido against another surprise entry, Sabu, who is going to win. Then we're going to have our next three matches, which is going to be Jerry Lynn going over Storm. Damn good match, I bet. Sabu versus Rob Van Dam. Lots of history there. Rob Van Dam wins. And then we're going to have Jerry Lynn beat Rob Van Dam for the TV title, which is going to set up a new feud, which is Rob Van Dam chasing the TV title with Jerry Lynn holding it. A complete reversal of their previous feud. Because, honestly, Jerry Lynn, I loved what they were doing with him towards the end because it was completely true. He had not really been used to the full of his abilities, in my opinion. Well, unfortunately now he's retired. At least semi-retired. I'm not sure if he ever does matches anymore or not. I think he's fully retired. Then we're going to have the Dudleys versus the Hardys and Dorian and Roadkill in a TLC match. And the Dudleys are going to win. Really, it could be any team winning. It's just that Dorian and Roadkill weren't known for doing a lot of hardcore stuff. So you would expect it to largely be the Dudleys and Hardys doing a lot of the hardcore stuff, with Dorian and Roadkill doing their spots when they can. And, I think it would be an awesome match. It's just, I think at that point, Dorian, a lot of talent, a lot of potential there. Roadkill, I've heard stories that, kind of not a good person at times. I just don't think that they were quite ready to be full-time tag team champions. But they didn't have a whole lot of choice because they were really one of the only... I think they were the longest-term tag team there at the time, other than the FBI. But this way we have the titles back on a team that has that, weight behind them. We're going to let everybody look really good. The Hardys are going to look great. Dorian and Roadkill are going to look great, but the Dudleys are going to go over. And that's going to set up our tag team division in ECW. And basically, like I said, we've cleaned WWE out of tag teams because they didn't use them, I mean, what was their tag team division for a long time? It was the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardys. That was their full tag team division. They would bring in, or they would have pairings of teams that would feud with somebody for a while and then break up. But dedicated tag teams, that was it. And of course, the Invaders in this case are going to choose to stay again because we're shaking up the rosters. And the final match is going to be Corino Sandman Incredible for the world title. I've got Big Brawl Game put down here. I'm not sure what the hell I meant by that when I wrote it down. Just a big fight, I guess. Corino Sandman Incredible in a big fight. Okay, so that's going to set up things that are going to be going on in those two companies. Let's go to WWE a little bit. We're going to start actually getting more into the actual invasion stuff at this point. With Nash and Scott Steiner are going to jump from WCW and invade WWE as the new NWO. I said I was going to use them, just not in the same capacity. And we're going to have X-Pac, Triple H, and surprise return Shawn Michaels join them. Basically, the Clique is back, with maybe a couple of additions, one or two. Scott Steiner might not have ever been part of their little clique, but we're going to go ahead and stick them all together as the new NWO, and that's it. That's the only guys that are going to be in this version of the NWO, and if Shawn Michaels can't wrestle at this point because of his back, he's going to be their manager. He's got the mouth for it. And basically, I just want to set up some feuds here, basically some of the top guys. We're going to have Nash against Undertaker, two big men. Michaels, if he can wrestle, feuding with The Rock. I want to set up Triple H feuding with Rhino, because Rhino, I think, could be a good monster face type of guy. If, he was always used as a heel, I think he could have been interesting as a face. We're going to have Steiner up against Kurt Angle, and X-Pac against Eddie Guerrero. And I'll go into any other thoughts I have on those feuds later. Okay. WCW, Mike Awesome, in a nod to his ECW betrayal, is going to turn on Ric Flair in a tag team match against William Regal and Test, who has been sent in to cause some trouble by Vince McMahon. And Mike Awesome is going to lead a group of mercenaries to WWE, which is going to include Bam Bam Bigelow, Hugh Morris, and Chili Willy from ECW, who we're going to have on the show for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. Again, Chili Willy, his look, his style, I think he would have fit in better on WWE programming. For some reason, I just get that feeling from him. He was just a little bit too... I don't know, it's just the whole hardcore thing, he didn't quite fit into it very well. I guess he could have had some good matches with Candido and some of the guys like him, but for some reason I see him in WWE. Okay, then in ECW we're going to have the Japanese wrestlers start coming in, and we're going to set up a feud between Mick Foley and Heyman. And we're going to kind of... I don't know, it's like my audio was getting messed up there for a second, sorry. So we're going to set up a feud on ECW, if any of that was distorted out where you couldn't hear. On ECW, we're going to go with the Japanese wrestlers coming in at this point, and then a feud between Mick Foley and Paul Heyman. And we're also going to bring Shane Douglas in. And basically, we're going to have this be a bit of a play on the Mick Foley anti-hardcore stuff he did in ECW. We're going to bring Steve Austin into it at some point, and it's going to be based around Mikey Whipwreck and the crazy, because at this point he was doing his crazy tag team thing with Tajiri and the Sinister Minister. So we're going to kind of break them up a little bit. And Mikey Whipwreck is going to be doing this thing with Steve Austin, with kind of Paul Heyman and Mick Foley being on either side of the debate. It's going to be like Austin, what's happened to my little buddy type of thing, kind of letting Austin go into his ECW history, brief as it was, and, how important it was to the development of his career. But, and he had this kind of friendly rivalry while he was there with Mikey Whipwreck and the Sandman, but what the hell has happened to his little buddy Mikey? And Mick Foley is, the same thing. Look what's happened to him. I was right all along. This hardcore stuff, has fucked up his head. And then you got Paul Heyman basically saying, fuck off, this is what we love to do, why the hell are you getting on his case? Who the hell are you to talk about not doing hardcore, Mr. going off the top of the fucking cage? Twice. And through the cage, and taking 10 or 20 chair shots or whatever it was from The Rock, that one on that I Quit match and all that stuff. So you have this real... I just think there's enough history, enough background, enough, mouth involved in that. Mikey Whipwreck would kind of be the guy caught in the middle of it, but then he's fucking acting nuts and crazy, so he doesn't give a fuck. And you got Steve Austin and Mick Foley, having this war of words with Paul Heyman, and Mikey's getting in there. At some point, Dreamer and Raven get involved in it. I'm not sure what the details would be, but this is just one of those things that I could see being a huge money draw. Because, it would just get so fucking heated, and there's enough history and background in there, and the guys are such good talkers, they could make people believe that this shit was real. At least enough. Get people wondering, maybe these guys are really fucking hating on Paul Heyman and Mikey Whipwreck and ECW. What the fuck's going on here, Obviously people aren't going to think it's 100% real, but, the suspension of disbelief. always important to watching any kind of entertainment, especially pro wrestling. So we want to set this whole thing up, which is going to end up in this feud between Steve Austin and Whipwreck. People don't give Whipwreck enough credit for his abilities. He's not a great talker from what I've seen, but he is a good wrestler in the ring. He definitely knows how to tell the story in the ring. And at that point, Steve Austin was kind of broken down and not able to go like he used to, so putting him in against somebody like Mikey, I think, would be a perfect situation for him, because it's easier on his body in a lot of ways. It helps get somebody like Mikey Whipwreck a lot more attention. You know, this is going to be a feud that's going to be on WWE and ECW programming, so it's going to be getting Mikey Whipwreck a lot more attention, which is going to create interest in ECW from all the WWE people who never knew Steve Austin was even ever there. You know, it's just, there's a lot of things that you could do with that. It's just, that's something I see being a really great feud with tons of potential. Back to WWE, Ric Flair is going to get into it with Vince over the betrayal of Mike Awesome. Basically, I want to set up a feud with Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair going up against Malenko and Benoit with Vince McMahon. Basically, you're going to have the two former WCW guys going up against the two current WCW guys, with Vince McMahon with his new power duo. Malenko was never a big name in either company, but I think he could have been bigger. Plus, I think he could have some good stuff with those, you know, Malenko and Benoit against Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. There's a lot of combinations there that would make for good matches and good TV. WCW, we're going to actually send Mike Awesome and Test back to start a feud with Farouk and Bradshaw over them leaving. Because, again, this is where we're going to use them as the mercenaries, those guys that kind of left WCW. So they'll be doing stuff on WWE, but their main roles, they're going to be the ones that are getting sent out to ECW and WCW to kind of fuck up the guys that left Vince and WWE. And then we're going to start having some of the new luchadors coming in, so we're going to be bulking up and keeping the cruiserweight division hot. ECW, this can start on ECW programming or WWE programming, but we're going to have Hardcore Holly start a feud with New Jack and Balls Mahoney over the Hardcore belt. This is where we're going to start taking the Hardcore belt from being something of a cartoony, goofy thing into being violent again. Because Hardcore Holly has a reputation, New Jack has one hell of a reputation, and Balls Mahoney is willing to take one hell of a hit over, you know, he's willing to take a beating. So those three guys feuding over that Hardcore belt, that's going to end up in some really fucked up intense matches, which is what we want. I'm not saying we need to take silliness out of pro wrestling entirely, but if you're going to call a division hardcore, then it should actually feel like these guys are willing to hurt each other over this title. It should feel like it's important to them. They are willing to do anything to win it and keep it. Okay, then we're going to go ahead, and if the Dudleys weren't face at the time, we're going to turn them face and have Spike join them, still doing his LSD gimmick. It was a good gimmick. And we're going to have them continue to feud with the Hardy Boys and the rest of the tag team division. There doesn't necessarily have to be any storyline right now. That's the sort of thing that you allow storylines to take hold as the opportunities presents itself. Until then, you just stick with the basic story of pro wrestling that they've kind of lost, is competition. So we're going to have Jerry Lynn and RVD feuding over the TV title. Again, like I said, with the roles reversed, RVD is chasing Lynn this time around. We might have Sabu start feuding with Shane Douglas. We're going to put Steven Richards back with Nova and feud them against the Hot Commodity, which was already being set up when ECW went under. Nova and the Hot Commodity were feuding. And I want Spike and Crash Holly, not related to the hardcore title, but these two, because Crash Holly was actually training with ECW guys at their gym. They've told some funny stories about him living outside in like a Winnebago or something like that, and going to Walmart to watch football on TV. But we can set, whatever the background we would come up with. I want Spike and Crash Holly, Spike is one of those guys another guy willing to take one hell of a beating. And Crash Holly, he did a lot of great shit during the hardcore title reign days. Those two, I want them in a war of a feud. We can come up with stuff, back with Holly being, when he was training in ECW and Spike kept him, and he felt like Spike kept him down somehow or was always overshadowing him. We can set up some sort of history there. They used to know each other. We just give them some history, build it up, and have it just turn into a long, 5 or 6 months long war of a feud with them just escalating to the point of having some fucked up match. It could be like a really messed up cage match, something where these two are going to have a blow off that people are going to remember for ages. Because this actually serves a very important point, is to show, because Spike is the giant killer. Sorry about that. Spike is the giant killer in ECW. WWE has always had this problem of, for some reason, making it seem like size will always beat, is always a huge factor in a wrestling match, mixed martial arts, that sort of thing. When it's been proven over and over and over again, in pro wrestling at least, that you can very believably have a smaller guy beat a bigger guy. It's just in how you present the story. So we want to show that Spike and Crash Holly are these super tough little motherfuckers that can take on each other and have this hellacious beating and walk away from it over and over again until they finally get to a point where they've both said, okay, fine, we've had enough, we're not doing this anymore. And then you can actually bring the feud back later on, because you don't have to, it doesn't have to be any real finality to a feud. If that animosity was there at one point, it can always come back again. You have them feud to the point where people are kind of getting tired of the feud, and you end on a really fucked up, crazy ass match that shows how insanely tough these two little dudes are, and then you can have them do whatever you want against whoever you want. Because nobody's going to look at them and say, these guys aren't tough. It's all in the presentation. Cruiserweight division is really going to be mostly competition-based. Well, we can have lots of mini feuds coming and going all the time. Luchador versus Japanese versus American type of shit. It's lazy, but it works. Especially if you have people not taking obvious sides. There's tons of things you can do with the Cruiserweight division. I've got down here main feud, Tajiri versus Rey Mysterio versus Helms versus Hurricane. Versus Helms as Hurricane. We'll go ahead and have him create that character at some point in here. Tajiri, Rey Mysterio, and Hurricane. They could have some great matches. And, why them feuding? Well, we'll see if I have anything written down about that in a little bit. The WCW Tag Division. Rick Steiner and Animal feuding with the New Age Outlaws and the Baldys. While they all feud over the belts that Palumbo and O'Hare have. And we're going to have them hold on to those titles for quite a while. Okay, here we get to my feud descriptions, what I do have. Because a lot of this stuff is you just have to see where it goes. Maybe one of these ideas doesn't work. The crowd just isn't getting into it. Then we'd have to kind of abandon that, have a little mini blow-off so it kind of ends, and then move on to something else. But I do have a good amount of faith in these ideas for these feuds, because they're based on things that people can easily understand. For example, we're going to get into my feud progressions here. The Terry Funk vs. Jeff Jarrett feud, the first one I was talking about setting up, again, and in brackets, versus Dustin Rhodes. is basically Jarrett is playing a heel. He's always at his best when playing a heel, in my opinion. Basically arrogance about his wrestling pedigree. We're going to have Funk as the babyface, and he wants to put the little upstart pipsqueak in his place. So basically it's Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett, that particular pedigree, whereas you got Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. and then Dory Funk getting in there, and then of course Dustin Rhodes is going to come into it at first to help out Terry Funk, because he's Dusty Rhodes' son. But then basically he's not going to necessarily turn against Funk and join with Jarrett in any way, but he's going to basically go into business for himself, because he's going to kind of at some point say, you know what, I've got a strong wrestling pedigree too. I'm not fucking chopped liver. What the fuck, you guys are not better than me, basically. And then just build it up and see where it goes. A Sting vs. Kanyon. We're going to start with Kanyon being a heel. And he's tired of being a nobody, he's tired of being held down, and he's going to target Sting. Sting's going to be his way of getting over. But at some point, I actually want to turn this around. People have said that they don't think Sting would ever work as a heel. I disagree. And this, of course, depends on if Kanyon would have wanted to do it. Again, maybe we can save another life here, because Kanyon, unfortunately, I believe, committed suicide. Because he was gay. And as a gay man in the pro wrestling world, it was not easy for him at all. And that's where I would kind of like to go with this feud, if he would have been willing to do it, is him basically coming out, which I know in 2001 would have been a lot harder than it is today. And this may not work at all. This might be somebody living in 2014 trying to do something that would work and probably work pretty well today, and try to do it in 2001 when it probably would not have. I don't know. But have Kanyon come out and basically shoot on his experiences as a gay pro wrestler and all the shit he's had to go through, and Sting not necessarily going full tilt heel, hating on being homophobic necessarily, but basically just saying, what the fuck do you expect? Absolutely no sympathy or empathy whatsoever for this guy's plight. And really let Kanyon cut loose and shoot. And I don't know if it would work, but I think there would be enough real emotion in there, and I think Sting would be able to do the, I don't give a fuck. I don't care what you've had to go through. I have no sympathy or empathy for you whatsoever. I think Sting could pull that off just fine. And again, I don't know if the crowd would get behind Kanyon or not. I'd like to think they would. And I think that could be a real emotional feud that could go a while and get a lot of attention, if they were willing to do it. Booker T and DDP, we can set up other things over time. There's history there, but them feuding over the belt, basic feud. Conan versus Kurt Hennig, with Hennig as the heel, Conan as the babyface. This could be something simple, just Hennig's arrogance and maybe some undertones of racism. I mean, that one is just mainly because I'd like those two to have a feud together, because I think their styles would mesh real well. Raven vs. Dreamer, there's tons of history to draw on there. It's partially nostalgia for the ECW fans, partially to introduce new potential fans to something that's a big part of ECW history, partially because those two have always worked well together. There's lots of reasons to do this feud, and there's any number of ways you can set it up and keep it going for a while. Nova and eventually Steven Richards against Hot Commodity. They had already set that up. Just keep it going. Maybe start with Super Crazy versus Tajiri versus Kid Cash. And then bring in Rey Mysterio and Hurricane Helms. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but maybe just this kind of evolving feud over the Cruiserweight title that has people coming in and then leaving as their part of the story finishes, and then other people come in, and over time you just have this kind of ongoing, ever-evolving feud over this title that incorporates different elements. I'm not sure how we would do that. That's why I'm a big picture guy. I would definitely need a story guy and a detail person to help me with this stuff. Carino, Just Incredible, and Sandman, that it was already well established. I'm not sure how long it would work as a main event feud for ECW, but it could be continued on for a while. Nash and Taker, it's just two names that people would like to see going up against each other again, with the whole WCW NWO guys invading WWE. I think they would have a decent feud. Same with Michaels and Rock. It would just be a good feud. Triple H and Rhino is largely to build the Rhino up a little bit more, or a lot more. He doesn't necessarily have to win in the end, but we do want to build him up and make him look good. Scott Steiner vs. Angle, again, it's just good matches, bound to happen. You can go anywhere you want with the story. Lots of possibilities. Same for X-Pac and Guerrero. I never really could think of any solid stories to put into it for myself. Again, it's one of those things that I would need other people working with me on the booking team that could, to bounce ideas off of each other back and forth. I've already gone over the Heyman and Foley thing, that, it just starts off basically as Foley and Heyman having an argument that evolves to include Mikey Whipwreck, and at some point Steve Austin shows up and is kind of going, like I said, is going, what happened to my little buddy? We kind of had this friendly rivalry thing, or, we got along real well in ECW, even though we were kind of feuding over the title. There for a while, we were buddies. What happened to my little buddy? He's fucking crazy now. And you just bring all those different elements in and just let them get as hot as they possibly can over the whole thing. Flair and Dusty Rhodes against Malenko and Benoit. Again, that's based off of Vince McMahon feuding with the WCW, and that's going to be the focus of that particular feud. Why am I using two former WCW guys instead of two long-term WWE guys? I don't know. I think it's just because I think Malenko and Benoit's styles would mesh better with Flair and Rhodes. Because that way you have... Malenko and Benoit are not good talkers, but they're damn good in the ring. Flair and Rhodes, again, they're not bad in the ring by any stretch of the imagination. They're both great storytellers in the ring, but they're better on the mic. That is always going to be their forte, is mic work. So, having, Vince McMahon to shore up the weakness of Malenko and Benoit on the mic by being their mouthpiece, and then Malenko and Benoit in there to kind of do some more complicated technical wrestling stuff with Flair and Rhodes to shore up any weaknesses they may have in some people's eyes as far as, match work goes. It's just, there's a lot of possibilities there. Perhaps I should put WWE guys in there instead of Malenko and Benoit. I'm not sure. But in my heart of hearts, I think that those two teams could have some great matches against each other and tell some really good stories. Test and Mike Awesome versus Farouk and Bradshaw. Just, a straight up Test and Mike Awesome are trying to take out the former WWE guys. And that would be a feud that could be going on for ages and ages and ages, because you let Test and Mike Awesome take out Farouk and Bradshaw at some point, and then you have them go after another team that left. And then at some point Farouk and Bradshaw can come back for revenge, and you could milk that angle for ages. Hardcore Holly and New Jack, and eventually bring in Balls Mahoney, possibly Sandman down the line. That's just every match is just them trying to kill each other. Not really, but looking like they're trying to kill each other for this title. Sabu and Douglas, I'm not sure why I wanted them to feud. Maybe it was just so they would be in there doing something. Douglas needs to be a heel. He is always way better as a heel. He is just literally one of those guys that you would love to slap. And from what I've heard, he's like that in real life. So when he's just being an asshole, that's really just him in a lot of ways. So Shane Douglas as a heel is a good money draw, because people will want to see him get beat. But Sabu, good worker, bit sloppy at times, can't talk at all, doesn't talk at all. It's part of his gimmick, so I'm not sure where I would go with that. There might need to be some other interactions in there. Maybe Candido reestablish the 3 count. Maybe have Sabu and Rob Van Dam team up again. There's different things that could be done there, but Sabu going up against Douglas, that would be a dynamic enough combination. And then, like I've already talked about Spike and Crash, that, I just want that to be a long build-up to one hell of a blowout match that could, again, down the line be revived, a feud that could be revived again. So that's pretty much how I would have done the Invasion, with kind of a slow build. So you have a few, a couple of months at least before you start getting into any heavy feuding between the 2, or the 3 companies, I should say. And also cross-promotional stuff that sets up all sorts of matches that people would want to see. It keeps it more or less believable, so people can suspend disbelief when they're watching, instead of having just guys somehow managing to evade security and show up at a show uninvited. You have Vince McMahon kind of capitulating, I believe is the word, unwillingly, but still giving way to what the WCW and ECW people want, and giving them their own shows, but then he's going to interfere with them as much as possible. And since he owns the 2 different shows, or all 3 shows, I should say, it's his right to do so. Which makes it more believable and makes it work better. And then, of course, you have you go ahead and have that NWO, the new NWO Invasion thing going on. Maybe you could bring Hogan into it at some point, but it would have to be a situation where you set his ass down and say, you're not going to fucking take over anything in this. You're here, you're going to do what you're told, so sit the fuck down or get the fuck out. Because I would not put up with Hogan's prima donna spotlight horror bullshit. Or Nash, either. Either one of them started in, they'd be fucking gone. Other thoughts on this? Basically, like I said, you just have to kind of see what would work and what didn't. Try and build up interest in a match, and if it's just not going to happen, people just are not going to get into it. Scrap that idea for something else, but just because they're not interested the very first time you try and set the thing up does not mean they're never going to get interested. You give it a reasonable amount of time to establish, and if it doesn't happen, then you move on. It's not like you don't have time. It's pro wrestling, it's on every fucking week. In this case, it would be on 3 times a week, 3 different companies. with all sorts of cross-promotional and interactions and stuff going on. You have plenty of time. You cannot tell me that you cannot spend a few weeks or even a few months trying to see if a feud will take hold in people's minds, and if not, then you scrap it. You do it in as organic and natural and realistic a way as possible, but if people aren't really getting into it, then you scrap it. But if people are getting hot for something, then you figure out a way to push that. It's, storytelling for TV 2 or 1.0, or 101, I should say. If something's popular, use it. If it's not popular, get rid of it, as long as it's not really important. And even if it is really important and it's hurting you in the long run, scrap it. Go with something else. There's lots of options, lots of possibilities. So that's why this stuff is just ideas of what I think would be a good way to set up feuds, set up cross-promotional interaction and feuds, so you can actually have matches going on that make sense without constantly resorting to people running in and setting up these feud storylines that just aren't believable. By having the Cruiserweight title and Hardcore titles cross-promotional with ECW, you can have lots of interactions there that make sense. You can, you've already established that tag teams and, wrestlers can move from one company to the other for different things. They don't have to stay, but they can if they want to, so you can, you do not have to fuck with people's, or, you don't have to insult people's intelligence by trying to force them into this fantasy land where somehow a person can evade security while wearing wrestling gear. Or not. Cornette's way of doing things was a bit better, but he was talking a lot about just basically paying them to go in and fight each other for, as close to be realistically as possible. And, I can kind of see it, but at the same time, these people are known. It's not like the security people aren't going to know who the fuck they're looking for and who's going to be doing what. The idea that they can just somehow evade security and get into the building, however, and Vince Russo was doing the same thing with his NWO invading WWE angle, is running in from the audience. Right. Who let him in? How did they get past the ticket people? It's kind of hard to not notice people like Hogan, Nash, and Hall. They're a bit big and tall and kind of, well known. So my way of doing things maintains that ability to suspend disbelief, because you're not doing stuff that just is stupid. And you set up any kind of dream matches you want to have by allowing and establishing cross-promotional stuff. And then you build up natural feuds based on what's happened in the past. Vince McMahon is going to focus his rage against Ted Turner on the most obvious two people, Rhodes and Flair. And that's going to happen or work into that whole feud with Malenko and Benoit, or whoever would be the best candidates for being in that position. I went with those two guys because I think they'd have great matches with Rhodes and Flair. But if it really needed to be, and at the time doing this, it would have felt like it had to be WWE guys in that position, then we could scrap like Rock and Angle or whatever going up against the guys I had them up against, Steiner and Michaels, and have them be the tag team going up against Dusty and Rick. Rhodes and Flair. Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Flair. However we would work it around to getting it going, that's where you have your WCW versus WWE feud. And you can bring lots of different people into it and send them right back out as necessary. But that would be the central focus of the feud, instead of just having this random one guy in the company goes and does something to another guy in the company. You give them reasons for doing these things. that's important to me, is that the story should make sense to a degree. You have got to allow people to suspend their disbelief when you're telling them a story, and this version of the invasion angle, I think, would allow that to happen real well. So thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting, entertaining, informative perhaps. If you enjoyed it, please say so in the comments. If you hated it, you can feel free to say that as well. But if all you're going to do is troll me, be warned, I do troll right back, and I can get real nasty about it. Because you're not going to make me cry just by saying some dumb bullshit. If that's all you're looking for is to try and make somebody upset, go find a little girl on YouTube that you can try and get to commit suicide, you sick motherfucker. Because I know that's the kind of person you probably are if you're a fucking troll. If you're a troll, you are. You're a fucking worthless piece of shit, so if you troll me, I will fucking hurt you. On a more positive note, if you would like to have a reasonable, thought-out discussion, I'm very much open to that, and I will be civil as long as everybody's civil with me. And if that comes across as defensive, I'm sorry, there's a lot of assholes out there on the internet. They're unavoidable. So I like to just get that across right now, that if you're a dickhead to me, I will be even worse back to you. But if you want to have just a good discussion, I'm more than happy to do that. If you'd just like to leave a nice comment or whatever, by all means do so. If you'd like to share the video, right under or in the description area, there's plenty of options. You can share it on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. There's lots of little social media buttons down there. Please share it on forums and other pro wrestling sites. Share it with your pro wrestling friends, I should say, who are fans. Your friends who are pro wrestling fans. There you go. And any other pro wrestling fans you feel might find this interesting. Let's see, what else is there. I did bring up the starting my own wrestling promotion thing. I will be doing a dedicated video on that particular subject a little bit later down the line. Basically, I will want to try and get the money together through Kickstarter. And if you've been listening to this and you agree with my points about what's wrong with pro wrestling today and where it kind of needs to go, the direction it needs to go in, and some of the things that need to be done to improve and mend it up, rehab pro wrestling, light a fire under its ass, however you want to phrase it. If you kind of agree with some of the stuff I was saying about pro wrestling and what it needs to be done, then keep an eye out for that, and there will be more information at the end of and during other videos such as this. You might also want to check out my Smart Talk series that I have got going right now as well, where I just talk about general pro wrestling subjects. I think that is it. Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to what I have to say from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you're listening and, watching and listening what I'm doing. And, again, subscribe if you want to keep up, get updates about other things I'm going to be doing. In addition to pro wrestling, I do music and stories and music production and lots of different things. So you can subscribe to get updates on the videos I upload. Watch the ones you feel that you'll be interested in, and ignore the ones that you won't be. And one last time, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.